2 years ago, Americans watched in horror as a crisis unfolded at the Kabul airport.
There's desperation and anguish.
More than 80,000 Afghans have since arrived in America, but this story is still unfolding. I'm Andrea Smartin. In my new podcast, Stranger Becomes Neighbor, we'll find out what happens to these new arrivals in our communities. Who would help our newest neighbors? Follow us at kslpodcast.com, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you listen.
Hey, welcome to Project Recovery, a podcast about addiction, but more importantly, it's about recovery, and it's brought to you by our friends at KnowYourScript.org. KnowYourScript.org is a wealth of knowledge right there at your fingertips, talking about the opioid epidemic, how to talk to yourself, your doctors, and even your kids about opioids. Sometimes there's a safer alternative and kind of all that good information, and without them, we couldn't do this podcast weekly. I'm Casey Scott. That is Dr. Matt Woolley. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. In fact, I used their website last week in a therapy session because I had an oppositional teenager sort of arguing with me about opioids and blah, blah, blah. And I had him, he went home, reviewed that, came back, and yeah, he learned a lot of good stuff. I think it's great for parents or people that are oppositional teenagers.
Well, because, that's what we've said about this podcast from the very beginning. When it comes to the world of addiction and recovery, what we really need as, a collective whole is an education, because there's so much of it that we just don't understand, and we just kind of took for face value from our parents or from the doctors or from whatever. And now we're really educating ourselves and figuring out what is out there. While I've said that from the beginning, we're not anti-opioid on this show. I think opioids serve a purpose. But what we are is educating the consumers that sometimes there's a better alternative.
Right, exactly. And if you don't educate yourself, then it's kind of intimidating when you go in and talk to the doctor. You don't know what to say, and so you just say, okay, and you take it.
So I had this interesting conversation with my daughter the other day. She's Frankie.
Frankie, right?
And we have these great conversations.
She's the middle child, right?
And I'm a middle child.
Yeah.
So we relate.
You guys do.
We both like to dance. We both think I'm funny. There's a lot of things going on there. But there's a show on Netflix right now, and I'm probably late to the party. It's called Outer Banks.
Outer Banks.
Yeah, and it's about these kids who live on the outer banks of kind of the society, and they're kind of like the workers.
It's not North Carolina Outer Banks?
I think that's it.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah, I think it is. And there's this guy named John B., and he's the hot stud that everybody's like, hey, John B's hot, Do
they say Johnny B. Good?
No, but they just say John B.
Okay.
And my name's Casey B. And
you're C Money.
No, I know, but I got a lot of names. So anyways, she goes, hey, Dad, can I watch this? Presley's watched it, and that's my older child.
Right.
And I go, I don't know. Let me talk to Presley. And then Presley goes,
Did you check the ratings?
Yeah. Well, no, I never did. Okay. I probably should.
All right. Well, you're 0 for 1, but keep going.
Yeah. And so anyways, she ends up watching it.
Yeah.
And then I start to watch it, and then I get hooked, and she gets hooked.
Yeah.
And so I go, Frankie, man, there's a lot of drug use in this. And she goes, yeah, Dad, but it's just party drugs.
What?
And I went, what?
Just party drugs.
Yeah. And so that's...
What's she learning from Johnny B?
Well, so here's the thing is that I go, you understand party drugs are just drugs? And she goes, yeah, but they're just doing them at a party. And I go, okay, we got to have a conversation.
That's awesome, actually, though, that you got that window into how she's thinking about it.
But when you think about it, that's what mainstream media is portraying to the kids.
That's true.
That it's just a party drug. No, Dad, you just do these at a party.
We're just adding to the fun.
Yeah, and no, it's not. And I go, yeah, but party drugs become home drugs, become street drugs. I mean, drugs
they're all the same.
They're all the drugs, but you're just thinking somehow they justify it in their mind, or she was in her little mind going, oh, this is just what you do at a party.
And how old is she?
So she's 13.
Yeah, so she's she's at that
tween age,
difficult age where she's trying to transition out of childhood into adolescence, and it's a mess.
Yeah.
And they still think like young kids at that age, but they want to do older teen stuff. And so, yeah, that's a good thing that you guys talked about that.
And so, once again, recovery saves the day with me, because we've had therapists on this show that says when you're watching TV programs, sometimes it's good to push pause, because now we can do that on TV,
right,
and have a genuine conversation. Because although she thought it was just a party drug, she didn't make the connection from party drug to,
Which, if she hadn't said that, I assume you would have assumed she knew the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's like, oh, yeah, there's drug use. But in her head, because party was in front of it, it made it somewhat acceptable. And that's what teens are doing, or that's what kids are doing. I was like, no. That's not how this works.
Oh, so was she receptive to what you said?
Yeah, I think so. And, in my recovery, I've got over 3 years now. I think because, and I'm hoping, my fingers are crossed, but because of my battle with addiction, I've saved them from a world of hurt. And I hope that they can learn from my mistakes. Now, I'm not naive to think that some of them, my kids might not try alcohol or might try something, but I'm hopeful that they'll be more cognizant of what it did to me and how it affected my life and maybe think twice. You can go, hey, you know what? I saw what my dad did. Mm-hmm. I saw how it almost ruined his life, almost ended up in prison. And because of that, I think I'm going to say no. Hopefully that I gave them a good excuse to tell their friends when they're in a situation where they might get peer pressured. Yeah. And go, hey, look, come on, everybody's doing it. You should do it. And they can go, my dad was an alcoholic and I saw it almost ruin his life. Yeah. And I'm going to pass.
Well, is it okay if I jump on you a little bit, though, for a second?
Yes.
Because you keep throwing out the word hope.
Yeah.
Obama would love that if he was listening. I'm sure he downloads our show.
Yeah.
But let's do better than that for our kids. I agree. It starts with hope.
Mm-hmm.
Let me make a suggestion on this one specifically.
I'm taking notes.
The key difference is because people observe stuff all the time and don't really learn from it. They know about it, but they don't necessarily gain insight and behavior change from it, i.e., people still smoke cigarettes. And sorry if you're a listener who smokes a cigarette. That's just,
you smell like an ashtray.
It's just the dumbest thing you could possibly do, right?
Yeah.
But young kids now are still smoking cigarettes, not just vaping. So that's an example. So here with her, you guys, you identified the problem. You got some awesome insight for how she was thinking. We call that a cognitive distortion. Mm-hmm. She was distorting the reality of the situation. It's just a party drug, and that's normal for that age. And then you had a great conversation with her, and you hope she learned from it. Let's do a little bit better. I would say this weekend, if you guys are watching this TV show or some other TV show, pause it and ask her, just say, hey, I want to follow up on our conversation. What do you think now? So a few days have gone by. Did she really process it the way you wanted her to? And if she says the right answer, which is like, oh, yeah, I totally get it, Dad, those drugs, and she sort of repeats what you said, then we don't even have to hope anymore. We know, at least in this instance, she learned what you wanted her to learn.
That.
Right?
I like the follow-up.
But if we just hope, 13-year-olds are kind of squirrely.
And I was maybe just white noise to her.
Yeah, we sometimes lecture, and my kids like to say, don't psychoanalyze me, Dad. And so they're not listening anymore, And so it's good to go back and ask an open-ended question, just see if she absorbed the message. If not, you have to do it again.
And just keep going.
Yeah.
I love it. See, that's why I like having a best friend that's a therapist.
Well, I like having a best friend who's good at golf.
You complete me, Dr. Matt.
Thanks, buddy.
I wish we were in an elevator.
Well, later. Maybe.
That means the show's over. But the show's actually just beginning, and this is what's going to be happening for you guys. We've got a guest that flew in from Washington. We got her via our good friend Rob Eastman. Her name is Gentry Jones. We're going to find out her story. You're listening to Project Recovery right here on KSL.
Two friends taking pictures of the rising full moon on a summer night.
Two teenage kids doing what teenage kids do.
When a stranger with a gun and a death wish changed everything.
It was violent, it was senseless, and I will never understand it, I will never accept it.
I'm Amy Donaldson, and unfortunately, we're all too familiar with stories about how violence shatters lives. But what we rarely see is how they are rebuilt. In a new podcast, The Letter, we relive tragedy, but only so we can hear the rest of the story. The struggle to reclaim lives, the realities of grief, and the possibilities of forgiveness.
I believe in miracles. Sometimes I thought, there are no miracles. Yeah, there are, and this is a big one.
Follow The Letter at theletterpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, welcome back to Project Recovery. I'm Casey Scott. That is Dr. Matt Woolley. He's a clinical psychologist, and our guest today has probably got the coolest names out of any guest we've ever had on the podcast.
Love it.
Her name is Gentry Von Jones.
Gentry Fawn Jones.
Fawn?
Yeah.
It even got better.
Like a baby deer, yeah.
Oh, that is awesome. Mm-hmm. And you came to us from Washington. Tell us how this all became a thing.
So about 6 months ago, I decided that I wanted to quit my job as a CPA, and I was like, I want to do recovery and life coaching. And I had followed Rob
Rob Eastman we're talking about.
Yeah, Rob Eastman.
So tattooed life coach.
I got to
Coach
pause for a
8.
second, though. CPA, you're a certified public accountant?
Yes.
That's a lot of school and a lot of work to get to that point.
Yes.
I'm right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So I got to the dream job. I was a controller at a fruit packing warehouse. Well, I don't know if a fruit packing warehouse, but the controller part.
I don't know fruit, but we like fruit.
What kind of fruit?
Apples.
Yeah, everybody loves apples.
Yeah.
Washington State, baby.
Washington State apples. But I got the controller position, and I just hated it. And then I was in recovery, and I was posting more on social media and connecting more with people on social media with recovery. And I was like, that's where I belong.
So we're going to find out more about that at the end of the podcast. But where does the story of Gentry Fawn Jones begin?
So I grew up in a really small town in central Washington. And I'm the youngest of 3. So
the baby.
The baby.
Huh.
The baby. And I fit it perfect. I mean, like the hyperactive, got away with a lot of stuff. Always blamed my big brother whenever we'd fight. I'd start it. He'd get in trouble. But both my parents are teachers. My dad's a basketball coach. Had a good childhood. My parents separated when I was in 5th grade. And I think 5th grade's kind of starting to be that transitional part too. And when that happened, I started to kind of feel like I didn't belong with other people. That's when I feel like I started really feeling that mental health of anxiety and depression. At the time, not knowing it was anxiety and depression. But then get to middle school, and that's when I had my first drink. And
tell me about that situation.
So I go to my friend's house where I was mad about a boy or something stupid. So we go to her house and her parents go to bed and she was like, let's go sneak some vodka. And I'm like, okay, cool. So we go and we sneak some vodka into soda, which we felt hammered. We probably had like a shot throughout the whole night. Like we probably didn't have very much. But I remember just laughing uncontrollably. I remember us peeing in the closet because we didn't want her parents to hear us keep flushing the toilet.
I think that's more than a shot. I'm just going to go out on a limb
there. Peeing in a closet happens.
Yeah. Maybe. Well, we were in it to a cup, right? So, but we were just...
Still. I'm not sure that makes it a lot better.
I don't know if you're saving this.
Anyway, so yeah, maybe more than a shot, but it wasn't like... we just got a good buzz.
But you're off... You're only in 7th grade at the time.
7th grade, yeah. So I'm 13.
You were 7th grade or 5th grade?
I was 7th grade at the time.
7th grade, okay. I was going to make a quick comment, actually. After this show, I get to go talk to a bunch of physicians about anxiety in kids. And guess what? Age 11, which is when you turn 11 in 5th grade, that's the age of onset, the typical age of onset for anxiety disorders in kids. It's that prepubescent time. And so that's interesting that you had kind of the family trauma because separation, divorce is always somewhat traumatic, even if everybody behaves themselves. And the anxiety kicked in. And then a couple years later, you find this relief from that via the one shot of vodka.
Okay, maybe 2.
So when you wake up the next morning, do you feel guilt? Do you feel shame? Or did you feel kind of like a bad girl? Like, hey, we did something fun and got away with it?
I think we did something fun and got away with it. I was a chronic people pleaser, and so I liked the idea that I did something I wasn't supposed to, but didn't get in trouble for it. Because if I got in trouble, I was devastated whenever I got in trouble. But alcohol is just so socially acceptable. So and when I go into high school and I'm a 3-sport athlete, volleyball, basketball, fast pitch. I was in ASB. I was in drama.
You're checking all the boxes.
Yeah. But then could get away with drinking on the weekend or smoking weed. We started smoking weed probably junior year. But was still doing all the things I was supposed to do. And I'm like, this is adult life. I mean, like, this is what adults do. They go to work and then they party.
Well, it's that rebellion that actually is very developmental. It's predictable. If you're a parent and you're like, oh my gosh, my kid's rebelling, it's like, okay, they're normal. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you found this way to kind of walk that line between being out there and being a people pleaser. Oh, wow, look at Gentry. She does all the sports and the grades and all the stuff. And then on the weekend, you could sneak away and be rebellious. And that's pretty typical stuff for a teenager.
Right.
So did you feel like you were drinking in excess in high school, or were you feel like you were just drinking how everybody else was? Or did you feel like it had something on you at that young age?
I feel like I knew the way I drank wasn't
normal.
I knew that I liked it more than I thought my friends liked it.
And see, that was with me. I always was the drunkest, but in my head, I was always winning. I was like, you guys were supposed to be getting drunk, and I'm killing you guys, you know?
The competition.
But I really did think that. I was like, I don't know what you guys are doing, but I'm here to get drunk.
Well, that's one of the things people talk about a lot. I think that's a common thread through people who struggle with addiction is you're competitive, and you want to 100% all or nothing. I'm going to be the drunkest or whatever. And so, we see that a lot, right?
You hear a lot of people in recovery go, I didn't have an off button. My off button was when I passed out. My off button is when I don't remember because I blacked out. That was your off button. It wasn't like I was never done at the end of the night going, oh, no, I think I'm good. Those words never came out of my mouth. I was never good. If there was something to drink and I was still up, I was drinking it.
I want to jump back, though. You said something I think is kind of interesting. Maybe you can expound on it a little bit. You said, I could tell I liked it more than my friends. There's something in there. Tell me, what were you noticing in yourself that made you feel like you liked it more than your friends?
It was just always my idea. We can see if so-and-so could buy it for us. I can sneak some vodka from my mom's liquor cabinet, which she was drinking water for probably a year and a half, and she didn't even know.
So you were the
Mom's
instigator.
like, man, this is the worst vodka ever.
You're the instigator.
Yeah.
You're the instigator, but you also mentioned this anxiety and talk a little bit about your parents were in your life, but what was that like having them separate in 5th grade, and then by the time you get to high school, what was family life like?
My parents, it was just I don't know. That's a good question. They were still good parents, but it was clear that the focus was on their divorce. And which I think happens in divorce. I mean, I don't think they did anything wrong. I just think that my mom was struggling, and we weren't on our own, but it felt like we were on our own.
Were you living with your mom or your dad?
My mom.
I was going to say that's a really common, especially the first few years after divorce, which were formative years for you, is a time where kids' supervision goes down. And understandably, parents are in that process of sort of rebuilding their lives and dealing with all the fallout, whether it's emotional, financial, whatnot, of being divorced. And so kids sort of, there's a lot of you good, and you're like, yeah, my grades are good, or, I'm still the star of the volleyball team. Okay. And so we don't blame parents for that. In fact, I've worried about I have one daughter, she's the youngest, and when we got divorced, that's been one of my concerns is am I supervising her enough? Are we spending enough time? So I think that does happen a lot. How about the anxiety piece and the depression piece? Do you feel like part of the reason you liked it more than your friends was it was an escape from that as well?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it was an escape from the pressure of that perfectionism of I have to be the best athlete. I have to be the best student. I have to be, or I want to be, because I was the one putting that pressure on me. No one else really put that pressure on me. And wanting to fit in. When I was drinking and socializing with my friends, even if I was making an ass of myself, at the time I didn't feel like I was. So I didn't have a whole lot of social anxiety in those moments because I was drunk. So it was the next morning I maybe have that guilt.
I did what?
Yeah. But in the moment it was yo, we're having so much fun. And really I was having so much fun. And everybody else was sipping their 03s. Do you guys do your 03s? That's what we started with.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
So did you ever get in trouble? Did anybody ever mention anything to you hey, you might be partying a little too much in high school?
Probably our senior year, my boyfriend and I, we partied more than everyone else, but we just started hanging out with people that weren't in high school.
So you found new friends?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ones that accepted you the way you were.
Yeah, that were over 21 and could buy us alcohol.
Okay. And so after that, you find yourself going to college, I guess, because you're a CPA. Mm-hmm. Where did you go to college?
Central Washington University.
All right.
For a minute. I went to a couple.
And how come a couple?
I went there for a year, and I didn't have volleyball, basketball, fast pitch, ASB, teachers that knew me my whole life that I had to be held accountable to. I didn't want that. I didn't have a name for me anymore.
An identity.
Right. And then I went down the rabbit hole of just drinking.
Did your parents, you said they were teachers, were they at your school growing up?
My mom's elementary and my dad worked at a neighboring town.
Okay. But still kind of that being a teacher's kid sort of.
Oh, yeah. If I messed up in class, they got an email through the work.
Yeah.
So you said after your first year at Central College, you went to another one and you went down a drinking hole. What does that look like?
Well, my first year of college, I got alcohol poisoning. It was like September, first fall quarter, I got alcohol poisoning. And then started doing drugs, cocaine, just kept going to school, but then thought that I just needed to switch schools.
That helped.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that didn't help. I just kept finding the same type of people every school.
We've had a few people on here who've talked about alcohol poisoning, and even in college, there was rumors of somebody getting alcohol poisoning. But I mean, I'll be honest with you, I'm a host of a recovery podcast. What is alcohol poisoning? I mean, what does it look like? I mean, did you end up in the hospital?
Yeah, so I passed out in a dorm. It was actually the weekend after the first time I had done cocaine. I hadn't eaten or slept for like a day and a half. We started drinking on a Monday night because that's responsible. And I ended up passed out in the bathroom of the men's bathroom too. I went to the wrong one. Passed out in the bathroom and somebody had found me and they called 911 and came in with a stretcher. I still had a sense of humor though because they asked me how old I was and I was like, not old enough to drink.
But it's a blackout at that point, right? Yeah, you don't remember and you have those toxic levels of alcohol in your system. It can be very dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So when rumors of your alcohol poisoning get back to your parents, was there a conversation or did they even know about it?
No, they knew about it. And they were worried, but I think it got chalked up to kids drink in college. And now you need to be more responsible and that I should have learned my lesson.
Did you?
I didn't get alcohol poisoning again. But
you kept partying?
Yeah.
And at this time, you've introduced cocaine, any other drugs?
Marijuana was always in there too.
Kind of a staple. Mm-hmm. But you end up graduating.
Yeah, so I went to Central for a year. I went to a community college, got my AA. I went to Bellevue College over by Seattle and got pregnant, and then ended up back where I live now with my son and finished college.
What was that experience like? You kind of skipped over that. Went to Bellevue, got pregnant, came back.
Yeah.
Like, what was that experience like?
Which part?
Let's just go all
getting
of it.
pregnant?
We'll assume
Well,
Bellevue's fine. How about the pregnant part? Yeah.
The getting pregnant part?
Yeah, I mean,
Was it a boyfriend?
Yeah. So actually, when I was sober, I guess I just skip a little part in there because I put myself in rehab at 21. Went to college and
put yourself in rehab.
I put myself.
Parents weren't pressuring you.
Nope. And actually, there was a lot of people saying like, "Yo, you're not that bad." Like once you go, you have that on your record that you went to rehab.
Oh, really? Trying to kind of discourage.
Is there really
you?
a rehab record?
I don't know. Just like in my
it's your permanent
social
record,
life,
from fifth grade. And all that spitballs. No, that's a myth, I think. But how did you make that decision? So if parents aren't pushing you and friends are kind of saying, "Hey, whoa, that may not be a good idea," what was it about your situation that made you check yourself in? Because that's a little unusual at 21.
I knew if I wanted to be the person I knew I could be, I couldn't be drinking anymore. And I was drinking a lot with people when people weren't around. So they didn't see how bad I was because days I wasn't working, I was just getting blacked out drunk at my house and like painting and just solo.
Yeah, they call it isolating.
Yeah.
You were just isolating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because you didn't want anybody to see how much you were drinking.
Right.
Well, and for a long time, that's been kind of one of the main red flags that they've talked about in the community is like, hey, if you're drinking alone, you probably have a problem. And so is that sort of one of the red flags that went off for you?
Yeah. And at the time, I was also dating someone who was sober. And he really was pushing me. So my family also thought that I was doing it because he was pushing me, which was true. He was pushing me. And I have like relationship issues too. So I probably was partly because
You're a people pleaser.
Right. I wanted him to like me. So if I go to rehab and get sober, we could be sober together and live happily ever after. And that worked out perfectly.
You end up having a kid and moving back home.
Yeah.
And you finish your degree.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's hear about the first. I'm kind of curious since now we get to the heart of it, which means there's a little pressure to social, that dependency. I want somebody to like me, people pleaser pressure. Maybe when we come back from break, we can hear just kind of like how helpful you felt that first rehab was.
You're listening to Project Recovery right here on KSL. Hey, welcome back to Project Recovery. I am Casey Scott. That is Dr. Matt Woolley. He's a clinical psychologist, and our guest today is Gentry Jones. We just heard from her talking about her kind of foray into partying in college, and she ended up going into rehab. Put yourself in there at age 21. So what kind of treatment facility was this?
It was a 21-day inpatient treatment facility, and I just wanted a break. I thought if I just took a break from drinking that I would kind of figure it out after that.
And I think a lot of times, I can speak for myself, you feel that break will get you Control-Alt-Delete. We'll just reset everything. Mm-hmm. And I won't do the things that I said I would never do again. I won't over and drink. I won't be blackout. I won't do this. I won't drive, those things. But normally never happens that way.
Right.
So you find yourself in this 21-day program. What did you learn there?
It was a really good experience. I wasn't done. I felt like I wasn't done drinking. I thought that it was going to be a quick fix of like, I'm going to go, I'm going to get this back under control, and then I'm just going to go back. And I wanted to just be a non-drinker. I didn't want to be somebody who has to be obsessed with not drinking. Mm-hmm. And so it was a really good experience, but I wasn't done.
How long did your sobriety last after that first rehab?
About a year. And I got enough to get pregnant and have my son. And then a couple months after I had him, I started drinking again. So
walk me through that first time you had a drink after rehab.
I was a new mom, and I felt that now that I was back home and that I had a kid to be accountable for, that I wouldn't go down that same rabbit hole that I was before. But now I had a little bit more maturity and
responsibility. Mm-hmm. And so why did you?
Because that's what people do. That's what moms do. Mommy needs wine. I mean, that's the culture. It's very, and I like to say it's like my small town, but it's really not my small town. It's everywhere. It's like you just drink. People, that's how you relax. That's how you have fun. And so I wanted to continue to fit in.
So once you have that first wine, how long does it take before you go back down that rabbit hole, you say?
So a couple months after that, I had a pretty bad night, and then I kind of would get better again. So I went back and forth for the next 8 years. I mean, I finally got sober for good when I was 30.
A bad night, meaning like kind of overdid it.
Yeah, like overdid it and like, oh man.
Pull it back the next day. Okay, I'm not going to go that far again.
You have to do the walk of shame, right, call all your friends, see what damage was done.
Little embarrassed, yeah.
Sounds like you know what that's like.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
But then I got pregnant again. So every time I got pregnant, I kind of got saved for the 9 months, and then a couple months after that for nursing. So it was like I'd get the break.
Like a year.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? That's not uncommon. We've had multiple people come into this podcast who are heavy meth users, heroin, but every time they got pregnant, they could stop.
Yeah.
You know, and then soon as, you know.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, thank goodness, which is amazing. Yeah. But then soon as, you know, they had the baby and they got somewhat normal, they were like, I'm never going to do that again, but they do it.
Well, and I think, Gentry, you bring up a really good point, is that a lot of times people will say these external factors will keep me in line, right? So now I'm a little bit older. I've been to rehab. I have a kid. Now I have 2 kids. You know, I'm a mother. You know, these sorts of signs of maturity or external responsibilities outside of oneself. It's like I'll rely on those things, and that'll help keep me in check. But how well did that work for you?
It was work. It was work. I mean, that's what it was.
It was hard to maintain.
It was really hard to maintain. And then I got pregnant again. Because that summer before I got pregnant again, it was pretty bad, and it was like people are starting to talk about how bad I'm getting. It's not just like she's just a drinker. It's like Gentry was passed out.
So we're back to the blackout drinking. Mm-hmm. And is this child number 3 or 2? I got before I got pregnant, that blackout period that I had that was really bad. That was like my 10-year reunion. That was child number 3 and 4. I got pregnant with twins. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah, just that's the way to do it.
Everything in excess, huh?
Yeah. Like, all or nothing.
Yeah.
How about being, you know, if there's something in here you don't want to talk about, that's okay. Mm-hmm. But now you've got children, and people are starting to say, whoa, Gentry's overdoing it. She may have a problem. How do you feel like that affected your ability to be a good mom? And I'll preface kind of the reason I'm bringing this up is at each stage of our life, we have like the one or two really important things that we do that are part of our identity, and at different ages, those change and they're different. So when you have children, part of your identity, good or bad, is what kind of parent you feel like you are. And so I'm just kind of curious. That sounds like you're sort of battling between trying to be a good mom and take care of these kids, and also we really have a drinking problem that's starting to get out of control. Do you feel like the drinking affected your ability to feel like you were being a good mom?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was a binge drinker, so I would be on top of my game for a while and get stressed out or feel like I deserved it. It's like one
like a reward, right?
It was either reward or it was
punishment.
Yeah.
No, I mean, and when I say a punishment, it was like, I'm horrible. I might as well just do this.
Sure.
And so you kind of lean into it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's like, they are saying I'm a drunk, so you know what? I'm going to be a drunk.
Be the best drunk.
Yeah. But I mean, in your addict brain, that makes sense.
Sure.
And it numbs you from the pain and having to feel. And so it sounds like you're going back and forth, back and forth. You have these long bouts of sobriety, then these horrible binge drinking where you have to do the walk of shame and the apology tour in the morning. Mm-hmm. It's got to be exhausting.
It was extremely exhausting. And so when I got pregnant the third time with the twins, I was like, okay, this is going to be it. This is going to be the time that I'm done. And I started drinking 2 weeks after they were born, which was the quickest I had drank after all 3 pregnancies. And this was the time I was so confident that I was going to be done. And then I just felt very hopeless. I spent the next year hopeless and just...
Was there a trigger that caused that? I mean, why so quickly after if you were so certain?
My ex-husband, we were still married at the time, he still drank. And so that was really hard that he would continue to drink in the household.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, where does it go from here? I mean, you start drinking 2 weeks after your twins are born. Mm-hmm. You said you spent a year being hopeless.
Can I jump in on that one too?
Yes.
I feel like I've interrupted a lot.
No,
today.
You're good.
Is that okay?
You're a doctor.
I can come back next week.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess this is an interesting thing that I think a lot about when we talk with people that are in the process or in recovery of addiction, and that is, with mental health issues like anxiety and depression, at first, the alcohol or the drugs feels like an escape. It feels like, wow, this is way better than Prozac. This is way easier than therapy. You get that relief, that disconnect from your problems and your stress and your depression. But then you use the magic word hopeless. I spent a year feeling hopeless. And many people, when they think about depression, they think about what they see on TV. Someone's sad and they stay in bed and cry. And of course, that happens. But I would say feeling hopeless is one of the most core aspects of depression. Would you say? And so now alcohol, instead of treating and making you feel better like you're getting a break from a mental health issue, it's making it much, much worse. That's my guess. You tell me what that year was like for you.
Yeah, I was trapped. I felt trapped with the alcohol and in the situation of not feeling supported in trying to get sober. I would get a couple of weeks under my belt and find alcohol in the house, and then I would rebel against that. Like if I found it, I would just start drinking it and be like throw it in his face, like, well, I found it, so it's your fault that I drank again. And I think I was very manipulative in that year too, by using him as an excuse for why I was acting the way I was. Was he always supportive or was he helpful? No, but I was also an alcoholic trying to get my fix.
But he wasn't holding the liquor to your mouth and making you drink.
Mm-mm.
Did he ever talk about him becoming sober himself as a teamwork?
I talked about us getting sober together.
Mm-hmm. He wasn't receptive?
No.
And that's okay. I mean, but because it's his life.
It's part of the dynamic, though. I mean, I think if you want to understand, if anyone wants to understand their story, you have to understand your dynamics in your intimate, close relationships. Like, how was I affected by that? That sounds like a tough dynamic.
Yeah, we had spent our whole relationship drinking together. It was kind of a big part of our life. And so when we weren't drinking, it's like we almost didn't like each other.
Well, that happens, right? I mean,
all the time.
Lots of people get together and their main, connecting activity, either doing drugs or drinking. And once that goes away, you're kind of like, oh, that's all we had in common, or that's mostly what we had in common.
We had a guest on the podcast probably 2 years ago. Her name was Lizzie Dankers, and she got sober. And her husband told us that a therapist sat him down and said, she's going to grow. Either you grow with her or you're going to grow apart from her. He goes, that's just how it is. And he loved her husband loved her so much, he goes, I'm going to grow with her. So he started going to Al-Anon because he just saw the writing on the wall. And that's what he attributes to them still being together, is that, that's what happens. And so all of a sudden you take something that was so central to your guys' relationship out of it. And then you go, well, what do we really have in common? Do we like the same things? Do we like this? And that's where you have that the identity crisis comes. It's like, well, wait a minute, why are we together? And so it sounds like you were going through some of that.
Yeah, and I wish we would have done more of that when I was struggling, pushed for therapy and pushed. And we talked about therapy after I was sober and after I had already decided I was done. Mm-hmm. And then I was done. And I mean, extremist, alcoholic, I'm just all or nothing. And once I was nothing, I couldn't unchange my mind. And I just saw him as alcohol. And he wasn't a drinker like the way I was. He can drink, he could function. He didn't burn his life to the ground the way I was burning our life to the ground. But once I decided that he was alcohol, they both had to go.
So you get divorced, mm-hmm. And at this point when you got divorced, are you sober?
I was sober and divorced at the exact same time. Like separated, I guess. Like when I got sober, I left the relationship.
So on this podcast, people often refer to their rock bottom. Do you have a rock bottom?
Oh, the last day I drank wasn't my worst day. It was just... And
it's not normally are they the same day? You know what I mean? Because...
Well, a rock bottom, I think, at least in the context that we use it, I kind of like to think of it as sort of a crisis that creates insight. And that may not translate into immediate behavior change, right? But there's, often something, because it is a disease and it's got a hold of a person, and good intentions and wanting to stop for other people has never been a thing. Like, it just doesn't. There has to be some sort of switch that flips internally. So I think what Casey's asking is, like, do you remember anything where you were like, you know what, that was the turning point for me?
You'll often hear people say, I was just sick and tired of being sick and tired. Or, that was it. I just, I didn't want to do this anymore. And it's not a disease where you can the next day just go, I'm better. We've got to do the work. You've got to do the therapy. You've got to do whatever it takes to get you to the best person you can be. And sometimes that takes multiple rehabs, months of a journey. So was there something that kind of just was the catalyst for you to go, yeah, I think I'm done, I'm out?
I had gotten drunk at a work lunch, had anxiety, and left work without telling anyone, and freaked a lot of people out at work. And they sat me down when I came back, and I was just crying hysterically. And I think the fact that, like, my inner circle knew, my kids knew that I was struggling, and kind of the people around me in my town, like not the whole town, just my inner circle in the town. But once people at work knew, it was like that circle got bigger and the accountability got bigger. And I was already trying for the last year to try and quit. But once that accountability hit, it was like, I'm going to lose my job. And then I can't do anything for these kids.
And so do you find yourself going into another rehab? How did you get sober?
I started going to AA, and I did that for about 2 months. And then I started blogging, and then I started posting on Instagram. And then Instagram kind of became my recovery. That's where I share. That's where I connect with people. That's kind of my outlet.
What was the first thing you posted that you said, hey, they get me, or this made sense? Do you remember?
Yeah. So when I hit 90 days sober, which was the longest I had gone for years, I started writing. And so I had put a blog out talking about how I hadn't been drinking for 90 days. And it was the first time I spoke publicly about my alcohol problem, because I never posted alcohol pictures at all on social media. Like, I tried to keep that clean image on social media. And I was very, very vanilla in it. I didn't talk about how I was, like, driving around drunk with my kids or whatever. It was just like, I decided to take a step back from alcohol, and I am 90 days alcohol free. And I had a lot of people, not even knowing how bad I was, reach out to me and saying, like, congratulating me and saying, hey, you know what, I have a problem too, or I've been struggling. People I didn't know is reaching out to me. And that's when it was like, this is where I like that feeling. I like knowing that other people connect. I don't feel alone. they don't feel alone because they read my story, and that was really powerful for me.
Isn't that amazing? Like how quickly people will connect back with you when you're authentic and share your story, because there's so many people that have the same or similar experiences, and they're just waiting to be able to connect with somebody that I think A, understands what they're going through, and B, isn't judgmental about it. It's just they're after the connection. And I think that is a very common experience when a person is willing to share their story, which, I don't know, was that kind of scary to put the I'm stepping back out
Did you
there?
hesitate to hit send?
Absolutely, because I was only 90 days, and I was like, what if I want to start drinking again?
And you're a chronic people pleaser, right? Like you wouldn't even post pictures of drinking in a normal social setting. So that, I don't know. What was that like going, yeah, I'm gonna air a little dirty laundry here?
It was another layer of accountability. My Instagram, I feel like, is a huge accountability partner for me. So every time I share, every time somebody else knows, it's just another reason to not do it again.
Yeah, I like that. In fact, I think in the early 2000s, they did a really great study on Facebook with creating these huge accountability partnerships with, putting out there, I'm going to start going to the gym, or I'm going to stop drinking, I'm going to do these things. And then you do follow-ups. And lo and behold, accountability partners are huge in helping people stop bad behaviors and maintain good ones.
You're listening to Project Recovery. You just heard Gentry talk about her first post on her social media that helped her get sober. Today, she's celebrating over 3.5 years of sobriety. We're going to find out what she's doing next. Stick around. You're listening to Project Recovery right here on KSL. Hey, welcome back to Project Recovery. I'm Casey Scott. That's Dr. Matt Woolley. Our guest today is Gentry Jones, and she talked about her first post that kind of got her on her road to recovery. No slip-ups in 3.5 years?
I've had one slip-up.
And was it a big slip-up? I mean, because here's the thing. Relapses happen. It's a part of the recovery world. I'm fortunate enough to say after 3 years I haven't slipped up, but I know that they can happen and they can catch you off guard and they can be around any corner. Do you mind talking a little bit about your slip-up, or is it something you're not comfortable with?
No, and I'm actually really glad that you brought that up, because I think it's important for people to know that a relapse or a lapse doesn't have to be a relapse. Like, you don't have to go completely back into burning your life to the ground. You've spent that time.
You've got those tools.
Right, yeah. You've built up your toolbox. So, like, it's just a lapse. So at the beginning of 2020, or I guess it wasn't beginning, March of 2020, I had just finalized my divorce. I was in a relationship that just ended, and COVID started. It was my birthday.
Wow, March 2020, go. Wow. What a month.
Yeah, so my birthday, and I was like, okay, this relationship ended. I was finally signing divorce papers, and we were supposed to go out that weekend, kind of, I guess, a divorce party, just to socialize with my friends. And then COVID happened, and everything got shut down. And I didn't have to drink, but it was all the things that would have triggered me in the past. So it was like, I'm going to get a free pass if I do this, in a way. Like, it's
like if I sat down and told everybody what just happened to me and what I was a guest, they're going to be like, oh, it makes sense.
Yeah. And so I think I started playing with that idea that I could get a free pass.
Did it, now knowing I'm probably putting too much of a magnifying glass on your people-pleasing personality, but personalities are that's everything in my world. So now you're alone. You're home. It's COVID. You have to be home. And people can't really see what you're doing. Did that play a factor? Do you think, like, oh, I'm not at work, people aren't going to see me?
Because chances are you could have just got away with it and not told anybody. You know what I mean? I mean, it's a thing. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it's a thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because COVID has really done a damage and a disservice to a lot of people out there in recovery because they are forced into isolation. They couldn't go to their 12-step meeting. They couldn't figure things out, and it was a perfect storm. Dr. Matt said the next epidemic's not going to be drugs. It's going to be mental health. And I think this has really forced a lot of people into that situation. And what you're describing happened to a lot of people. Mm-hmm. But you decided, let's give it a shot.
Yeah. So, and I actually wasn't alone when I started drinking. I knew I already had the thoughts in my mind that this could be the perfect storm for me to get away with this.
That's an addict brain right there. It's a total addict brain.
Yeah. And it wasn't even like I was feeling that emotional. It wasn't feeling like this is the only way it will relieve pain. It was really this thought of like, I could get away with this if I want to try it again. And I wanted to go hiking with some friends because we were like, if we're outside, we'll just go. Some trails were still open. And I went up to their house. They didn't want to go, and they wanted to play Monopoly. They're all drinking, and I'm not. And I started like taking sips off their drinks. Like, well, let me just try it. I just want to try this. And then took a couple more sips. And then I'm like, well, I've already drank, so let's just start taking shots. And it was not a fun night. Like, it was not like I fought with the guy that was there, and he threatened to call the cops because I was like shoving him, and called my dad. I'm like, really? Like, I'm 32 years old. You just called my dad?
I'm guessing the Monopoly game didn't go well.
I won because I'm an accountant.
Okay, it did. So, all right. Well, there you go.
So even Buzz, I still won. But yeah, so it turned into a little bit of chaos. And then the next morning, just felt awful, just physically awful because I hadn't poisoned my body for 2 years. And then mentally just was the guilt, the shame, the embarrassment. And when I left the house, because I stayed there, wasn't going to drive home, but I left the house and went to a gas station and bought all the things I used to buy when I would be in that guilt, shame, depression. So I bought like my Mike's Hard Lemonades and was just going to go home. I didn't have the kids back for 2 more days, and went to my house and had them all sitting there. And I called a friend to come get them. I was like, I don't want to keep doing this.
And so they came and got your Mike's Hard Lemonades. Mm-hmm. And you got back on the road to recovery.
Yeah.
And it happens. And that's you didn't burn your house down again. You didn't start back from zero. And so
how has that benefited you today? So this lapse, I like how you phrase that. How has that helped you in what you're doing today, having had that lapse?
The lapse felt like a very good confirmation that I can't drink normally, because it was at first like, oh, I can have a couple sips and I'll be fine. But as soon as alcohol was in my system, all I wanted to do was drink until I was passed out. It went straight back to that. And it also has been a great tool for me helping other people to be like, okay, this happened to me, and if it's happened to you, you don't have to keep going. Because I think people get so fixated on how many days in a row. They want that days in a row count. And when they break that, they think that they deserve like a bender before they start over. Well,
so it's, Dr. Matt said it a couple times during this podcast that addicts, a lot of us share that same all or nothing mentality. And so if I can't have all of the sobriety, then I'm going to have none of it. And so if I've relapsed, then I'm just going to go way back into it because I don't have it. And
that's that personality structure.
I proved you right, and I proved you right because you said I was never going to do it, and here I am drinking. So you know what? Screw it. Let's just go for this. Mm-hmm. But you didn't. You stopped it. You turned it around. You made a call to a friend because the opposite of addiction is what, Matt?
Connection.
And you have that connection. You had somebody come over and help you out. And I think that's great. And when you're talking with people to help them, that it is a reality. I mean, a lot of relapses happen. I'm not saying they're great, but they do happen. And it seems like you learned a lesson from this. Mm-hmm. So you start posting on Instagram, you start blogging, and you're doing all these things.
Did you post right away about your lapse?
Yeah, I called my parents right away because I didn't want them to find out.
We already called your dad.
Well, my dad already knew.
Yeah.
So then I talked to my mom because I didn't want her to find out on social media. But I felt, because at that point I was already running a sober page, that if I didn't share, that whatever I shared next was just going to be a lie. And then I also felt...
So what was the response when you talked about your lapse on your social?
Oh, well, a ton of support. A ton of people, very supportive, very loving, very kind. A lot of nice messages saying, just keep going. And the accountability, back to that accountability of like, I've now outed myself that I did this. So I can't keep drinking secretly and get away with it. They now know. People are now going to be watching me to see, like, is she drinking again? Is she acting like she's drinking again? And so that accountability and just not wanting to be a liar on my page.
And so you start, you got a pretty good presence on social media. How does it go from a good presence on social media to I'm going to quit my job?
Well, I wasn't happy. And I feel like in the last 3 years of trying to be a better mom, trying to be a better person, I wasn't leading the example of chasing my dreams the way I would tell my kids to chase their dreams. And I used to be so obsessed with like not wanting to be obsessed with alcohol or like sobriety. Like, I don't want to be the person that's only stays sober because they're obsessed with sobriety. But my mindset has changed to like, it's not about being obsessed with sobriety. It's about being obsessed with living my purpose. If I had a problem with bunions, I would probably have a bunion page and be shouting it from the rooftops on how to help people with that. And so it's like, it's not about being obsessed with sobriety. It's like, my purpose is to help people. I have a comfortability with talking. I have a comfortability with sharing my story. And sitting at an accounting desk, I felt like my soul was slowly dying. Like, it just wasn't where I belonged. And so I had just started setting things up at my house. I enrolled in a life coaching recovery coaching course. I started setting up a home office, started putting money aside to be able to try and build something, and just got to a point where I talked to Rob Eastman.
And I'm so glad you did. Because of him, you're here today. In my recovery, I tell people all the time, I got sober to live, not hide. And unfortunately, I know a lot of people in the recovery community who got sober and are just hiding. I wanted to get out and live life. You know what I mean? There was so much more out there that I wanted to do. And because of my recovery and my sobriety, I'm able to do that. Because in my addiction, I was just in a prison. I was in a prison of my own thoughts, my own feelings, and my own emotions. And I wasn't really being authentic. I was giving you who I thought you wanted to be, and I was hiding behind alcohol. And so it sounds like that you found a purpose, and it's helping people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's amazing. And so now you're a life coach, and you're working with others to help them find their road to recovery.
Yes.
That's amazing.
So authentic happiness, I guess, is kind of this term that popped in my head, which incidentally is also the name of a good book by psychologist Martin Seligman. But authentic happiness, when a person really understands through their self-awareness who they are and what drives them, what makes them feel good, purposeful, then we tend to call all of those things together happiness. And I think that that's one of the key components in maintaining recovery is when a person, we've said this before, just because you get sober doesn't mean problems go away. They're there. In fact, all the stuff you're drinking to avoid, now you're sober and dealing with it, right? And so making life changes, that's a great example. And that I'm sort of flabbergasted that because I know several people who have worked their way through getting their CPA. It is a long road. It's a master's degree and a lot of testing afterwards, right? Mm-hmm. And I hate standardized testing, and so it's always amazing to me when people do so well at it. To be able to say, you know what, I accomplished all of this, and CPAs make a nice income, and I was the controller, so I'm top dog there at the apple farm or whatever, and so I've reached a pinnacle goal, but I'm going to leave it in pursuit of authentic happiness and really finding my real happiness. And I admire that tremendously. And I'm glad you're here sharing that message. Not that everybody needs to quit their jobs, but everybody should take, I think, a look periodically at what's my purpose? Do I feel purposeful? Do I feel grounded? Do I feel motivated? Am I happy? And if not, I ought to pursue that, because whether I'm trying to recover from drugs and alcohol, or being a grumpy jerk, or overeating, or whatever I'm trying to do to make my life better, that's a pursuit. I need to cut out, change things that take me away from that happiness. So I think that's an amazing part of your story. I'm glad you're here sharing that today.
And when I look at you, the word that pops into my head is brave. I think you're a brave human. I really do. From the fact that you went into rehab at 21, you raised your kids.
She had twins,
Yeah, 4. She's got 4 kids.
4 twins?
No, 4.
Oh, 4 kids. Yeah.
But you are brave, because everything you've done is take bravery. And, a lot of people would just turn their back and run and hide, or just kind of act like it didn't happen. But you hit it head on. And I think that's an amazing quality that you have. And I think that it will really help a lot of people out there. I do want to ask about your kids. How are your kids doing?
They're great. They're just little psychos. They're 11, 8, and then the twins are 4 now. And they're a lot of fun. They know about my recovery. They know about what I'm doing, and they're proud of me. And I like that I'm doing things that aren't what typical kind of moms would do, maybe. But
You're brave.
Yeah. Well, and I just think it's really important to, I on my Instagram, I dance on my table. I do weird stuff. I'm chaotic and whatever. And I used to try and fit into this cookie cutter, who the best type of mom is. I want to be that mom. I want to be put together and organized and adultish. And it's but that's not me. That's not who I am. And I'm not saying I want my kids to act like dancing weirdos that are on coffee tables all the time, but I want them to be themselves. So if that fits you, then do it. And because that's what it fits mom. So that's what mom does. But if being a farmer fits you, go be a farmer. If being a musician fits you, go do it. I just want to model being yourself.
Well, since we have the life coach here for a second, Gentry, give some parents advice. How young should they start talking to their kids openly about things like drugs and alcohol? What would you recommend? You guys were talking about it earlier at the beginning of the show, and I feel like the earlier you can talk to them about it, the better. The more I talk to my kids, the more I'm open with them about it. We're in a day and age where they can consume so much media that provides all these false messages, right?
Yeah. That if you're not also giving them, this idea of constantly protecting our kids, I don't always 100% agree with. I feel like we need to show them what real life is going to be like.
Prepare them.
Yeah, I was going to say preparation protects them if they feel prepared for the world.
My good friend Rob Eastman told me once, I'd rather be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war.
Well, that's just good common sense.
It really is. If people want to find out more information about you, Gentry, and they want about your life coaching skills and everything that you have to offer, where do they find it?
So the best way to find me is on Instagram at Life with Gentry. I also sell shirts that are alcohol-free AF, so they're AF squared. So you can go to afsquared.com. But Instagram, I'm on TikTok, Life with Gentry.
I love it. Any final thoughts, Dr. Matt?
Oh, this has been great. No, I love the other theme, I guess, that this guy popping into my head is, and maybe this only makes sense to me, so I'll make it quick, external versus internal. When we do things for external reasons, it might help and get us certain places. It might get us some accolades, but it's not going to be authentic. If we really want to be successful at the hardest stuff in life, which is overcoming drugs and alcohol, being a great parent, being your best self, it has to be internal. And I think that was the switch that flipped, I think, for you when I'm going to put words in your mouth and correct me if I'm wrong, when you stopped caring so much what other people thought about you and you started doing things because you were being your real self. And I think that's a great message. How'd I do? Is that good?
Yeah, no,
okay.
Thank you. I love it.
We'll leave it with that. That is the wise words from Dr. Matt Woolley, a clinical psychologist. Our guest today has been Gentry Jones. She's been amazing. Make sure you go give her a follow. Thanks for stopping by. I'm Casey Scott. Project Recovery is brought to you by our friends at knowyourscript.org. And in case you forgot, Project Recovery is what?
It's KSL Podcast.
Amen.
The contents of this program are for informational purposes only. The program is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, licensed therapist, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you've heard on this program. KSL does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, physicians, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned on the program. Reliance on any information provided on the program is solely at your own risk.
A stranger with a gun came upon two teens taking pictures under a rising full moon. But violence is only the beginning of this story.
Sometimes I thought, there are no miracles. Yeah, there are, and this is a big one.
I'm Amy Donaldson, and I've spent my career talking about how lives are undone by violence. The Letter is a podcast about how lives are remade. Follow The Letter at theletterpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts.